Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm a librarian at the Cozby Library and Community Commons, and I'm coming to you from the future, where I have just finished decorating my canvas tote. So this is one of the crafts that's included in the adult crafting bag. The supplies that you'll need for this craft are the permanent markers and the pipettes or the eyedroppers that are included in the bag. This is just the canvas bag that all of the supplies came in. And I flipped it over on the back and decorated the back. You may also need some other things like painter's tape if you want to make this design, some cardboard to go inside, some rubbing alcohol. So that's actually what creates this design, is the application of rubbing alcohol to the permanent markers. And you may need some other things like some empty food containers, or maybe a spray bottle. I recommend that you watch this video the whole way through so you can get an idea of the supplies that you may want to get, and also the design that you may want to aim towards. So before you get started, do watch this video all the way through first. And if you weren't able to get a craft bag, I hope that these supplies are simple enough for you to get that you can follow along with us. Alright, so here are some things that you might need for this craft. Now you will for sure need something to dye, so in this case I'm going to be using the canvas bag that was included in our craft kit for adults. This is a 100% cotton bag. I have already washed it. Whenever you do a dye project, whether it's tie-dye or wash and dye or even this marker tie-dye, you want to make sure that you've washed whatever it is that you're dyeing if possible. So I've seen lots of people use this technique on like canvas shoes and bandanas or those zipper pouches that you can buy at the craft store. If you are using a zipper pouch, you may want to buy one that does not have a liner in it because this will soak through. But just make sure that you wash the item if at all possible, and make sure that it is either 100% cotton or 100% linen, or even maybe wool, although wool can be kind of hard to dye. But the polyesters are not going to dye. They're not going to take up the dye well, because that is actually plastic, is what polyester is. So you will also need at minimum some rubbing alcohol. So this is 91%. That's what you want to aim for. You will also need permanent markers, either Sharpie or Bic, or it doesn't really matter what brand as long as it's permanent markers. And that's all you need at the minimum. However, you will also need some way to apply your alcohol. So you can either use a spray bottle, which I did not include in the bag, or you can use these droppers, which I did include. You'll need some container to put your alcohol in, as well as maybe some round containers to make shapes with your design. You'll see what I mean here in just a minute when we start making our first design. You'll need some rubber bands if you're going to be using that technique. And you may also want some painter's tape for the second technique that I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead and get started with this first technique, the one that uses the rubber bands to make shapes on our fabric. So I actually already have my bag already set up, and I'll show you what I did. So in this technique, we're going to be making what look like little starbursts or maybe dandelion shapes. This is a really common one you'll see people use. So here what I've done is I've taken a couple of small cat food cans, and I've taken some yogurt containers, and I've stretched the fabric over the containers to make circular shapes. And you do want to try to stretch the fabric and make sure it's taut. It's a little easier when you use the opening of the container. I used the bottom of the yogurt containers because I wanted that size. I didn't want the bigger size on the other side. But it does work a little bit better if you use the open end of whatever container you're using. So here I have my 4 shapes. And now I just need to make my designs. And so this can be, I'm using some different colors just to show you kind of what the different colors turn into when you use the alcohol on them. So the basic idea of this is that the ink is going to spread with the alcohol. And for some things that are colors that are not primary colors, like for example purple. So what is purple actually? Purple is red and blue mixed together. So you might actually see some hints of that at the edge of the color blob once it starts to spread with the alcohol. So bear that in mind, but that's why I'm using multiple different colors, just to kind of give you an idea of what your design might look like using some of the different colors. And don't get too concerned about your design being super duper neat, because it's all going to spread out and change once we apply the alcohol. So you might want to try some dots. Let's see, I think I want one more color in here. What do I want? I think I do want the purple. Have some dots in here. And let's see. For this one, on this end, I think I'm going to make kind of a pinwheel. So I'll have some orange, some yellow, some red in the center. Maybe this one will turn out looking a little bit like a sunset. And then what else can we try? Let's see, let's try some circles. So this one I'm going to make some rings. And you can use a lot of ink, you can use a little bit of ink. I'm going to make this a little bit, I'm going to put a little more ink in this one, we'll see how that turns out. This is another one of those crafts that you kind of have to let go a little bit of what the final design might be, because it's going to kind of do what it does. And whatever it does will probably look amazing. All right, and then we'll use, let's see, what colors do I have left? And in this one, let's see, we'll just try doing more kind of a blob, or maybe like a stained glass effect. We'll call it stained glass. That sounds prettier, doesn't it? So we'll just do kind of a stained glass effect with this one. Make just big blotches of different colors. So the rubber band and the containers are going to define the shape that we're making. So that's why we have those there. Because otherwise the ink would just kind of spread wherever it wants and won't have a very defined shape. So you can, if you want, and I'll show you a little bit later, that what we're going to do on the bottom of the bag is we're going to insert some cardboard into our bag here. And then we'll use the bag flat, and we'll make a design flat on the bag, and you'll see what kind of effect that has. Okay, so that one's just going to be really abstract. So I have all my designs, and now I need to apply my alcohol. So we will use the dropper for this. And you don't need very much, but at the same time you want to make sure that the cloth is saturated. So take your alcohol, and you can see almost immediately that it will start to spread. So again, don't need to make it to where it's just sopping wet, but you want to make sure that it's saturated. The ink will not spread in any place where there's not alcohol, because that's what's doing the spreading. So far I'm really liking how this stained glass one is turning out. I'm going to try to zoom in here a little bit and show you what's happening with some of my designs. So you can see how things are already starting to spread. So I'm going to let this sit for a little while and we will be back to see how my designs turned out. All right, we are back and it's been about 15 minutes. You may even want to let your design sit a little bit longer. I can still feel that there's still a little bit of dampness, but I wanted to show you some of the different things that happened with some of my different designs. And this can be something that you can plan a little bit for. Again, the ink is going to kind of do what it does, but let me show you what happened in some of my different circles here and how you can either prevent or encourage some of these different things to happen. So I'm going to again zoom in a little bit. So on this one, you can see that there's a little bit that got outside the ring of the rubber bands. I don't really mind that so much. This is sort of a, I don't want to call it a messy technique, but again, a more abstract technique. So the fact that a little bit escaped here doesn't really bother me all that much. Again, I wanted this to kind of look like a sun, so I think that really just emphasizes that. But if you don't want any ink to escape out the sides of the rubber bands, and you can see that it happened a lot over here. Again, I kind of like that look. Doesn't bother me that much, but if you don't want this to happen, if you don't want any of it to end up outside the rubber band, you probably want to limit your alcohol application to the center of your design, and then it will move itself out to the edges. So probably why this happened is because I put too many droplets near the edges of my cup, and I didn't keep it enough to the center. So you can see here, my design stayed better within the rubber bands because I didn't put quite so much and I didn't put it too close to the edges. And then here too. And I don't know if you can see it, but especially here you can see that turquoise color that I used at the edges here has separated into and combined with some of the other colors to make some purple, some like royal blue, some turquoise or aqua here at the edges. So that all came from that one color. And here in my sunset, some pink is actually showing up near the edges. So that's all those markers separating into their different color components. So I like the results, what I got here. Again, this is one of those things you sort of have to let go and it does what it does. We will come back a little bit later once this has totally dried, and to set this color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an iron on the highest setting that's safe for this fabric, and since this is cotton fabric, that's pretty high, to set my color. The other thing you can do is put it in a dryer. I will say that I washed everybody's bags before I gave them out, and so that's why they're a little bit wrinkly. It looks really wrinkly because of the light on my project here right now. But I did wash and iron everybody's bags to begin with, so you do not need to pre-launder your bag. It has already been washed. And I did that just because it does get really wrinkly when you wash it, and it is kind of annoying. This permanent marker is not 100% permanent. It is fairly permanent, but I would be really careful about washing your bag in the future once you have used this technique, because it might not be 100% permanent and your design might wash out and it might get on some of your other clothes. So after you have dyed your bag, it maybe should be treated as like a hand-washed item from that point on. So what I will do is I will set my design once it has fully dried using my iron, and we will be back to show you what that looks like, and I will show you what I'm going to do on the bottom of my bag. So I'll see you then. Be back in just 1 minute. All right, we are back, and I have set my design with an iron on high heat, so heat appropriate for a cotton item. And I've also prepped for the second technique that I'm going to show you, and I'll explain that in just a minute. But first I wanted to show you one of the advantages of this technique that's a little bit different from tie-dye, although I like tie-dye too, is that you can continue to alter these designs. Now, I really do like how my designs turned out, but my ultimate plan is to put stems and leaves on these and make them into flowers. And so maybe I want them to all look a little bit more complementary to each other. Like maybe I want a background on this one so it looks a little bit more solid, and maybe I want a little bit of dark color in this one. So I can continue to work on these designs to a point with this technique. I have put cardboard inside now since I'm not using the cans anymore. I do want to make sure that my ink does not bleed through to the other side. So I've got a piece of cardboard all the way inside my bag here. So let's make a few alterations. So I'm just going to maybe put a little bit of color in the center there. And now this time when I apply my alcohol, because I don't have those cans anymore and I don't have the rubber bands, I do want to be a little bit more careful about keeping my alcohol drops to the center so that I don't get too much spread outside my original circle. I'm just going to put some so this will just add a bit more. And now I will apply my alcohol as before using my dropper. Just a little bit, just a little goes a long way. And I'm going to try, I'm not even going to put any directly onto the yellow. I'm just going to see how far the alcohol will spread, because it does spread through the fabric eventually and kind of catches. You can really see how it's spreading on that fourth design there. So I'm going to leave that alone for a little bit and see what that does. And in the meantime, I'm going to show you what we can do on the bottom. So on the bottom here, I have used painter's tape to mark off a design. So this is going to make more of a tiled design. I've just done it randomly. Of course, you can do whatever kind of design you like. Make sure that the tape is fully adhered to the fabric. You don't want any gaps. Now, this will not keep the alcohol totally from seeping under the tape, but it will define the shape in the same way that this sort of defined the shape up here. So again, it's not going to be perfect and crisp probably, but I think you'll really like the effect. So this is another technique that you can use, and you can still use the dropper for this technique. I'm going to use the spray bottle this time and just see what kind of a difference that makes, but it will still work with just the dropper. All right, so let's get to coloring. And again, I'm just going to use all sorts of different colors. I'm not going to go too close to the edge here because I don't want there to be any bleed through around the edge of my cardboard. So I do want to be a little bit careful near the edge. And again, make sure that the tape is well down. Let's see, I'm going to pause the video while I finish my design. I think you kind of have the idea, so I won't make you watch me fill in all of my shapes. So I will be back with you in just one moment. All right, and now I have filled in all of my different shapes. I'm going to make sure again that that tape is well taped and that my cardboard goes all the way down. Before I apply the alcohol. And again, I'm going to use a spray bottle for this step. This is just a simple spray bottle that you can get in like the travel section at the grocery store or at your you know, Walmart or a place like that. So this shouldn't be too difficult to find. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, but you can still use the dropper for this part too. That still works, but we're just going to see, let's see what this spray bottle does. All right. So the application does seem a lot lighter with the spray bottle, I will say that. It's not really soaking the fabric like the dropper did. So I may actually go back and end up using the dropper after all. We'll kind of see what this does, and then I'll see if I want more of a spread. In the meantime, let's take a look at what has happened to the top part of my design. So you can see that that yellow and orange has spread really nicely. I'm going to see if I can close up here. Here we go. So here are my designs from before with a little bit of additions. And I really like the way this one turned out. It looks like kind of like a pinwheel. So this one also has spread quite nicely. Now I could continue to apply more alcohol and maybe get more of a spread there, but I think I like it the way it is. Alright, so I will leave my design down here to set. Like I said, I may end up actually using the dropper on this after all. I have seen people use a spray bottle and be pretty successful with it, but I'm not sure there's enough alcohol on here to really get the effect I'm looking for. So maybe if you want less of a spread, use the spray bottle. This is kind of a learning experience for me too, so I'm learning all sorts of different things about this technique. And that's really the fun thing about getting a kit like this, is that you can experiment with it. So use it on, maybe if you want to maybe save your bag for later, you can do this, like I said before, on a bandana, or even just on a piece of cotton muslin. If you have some laying around the house, maybe you sew a lot and you have some scrap fabric laying around the house, you can experiment with some different techniques. So I will leave this to set for a bit. I think I am going to end up using the alcohol dropper to get the effect that I really want, but we'll leave it to set and then we'll be back. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes. I have taken some time to fill in some spots, just like I showed you up here. I went back and I filled in some spots and applied a little bit more alcohol. The second time around, I did use the spray bottle again because I felt like it gave it a lighter application, and then I went in just very precisely with the dropper and placed drops only where I thought there needed to be a little bit more spread. So remember, when I take this tape off, this is not going to be a complete barrier. It's just going to be a suggestion of a shape. So let's see what kind of result we got. And there we go. So really interesting look here. You might even want to use thinner tape, but I really like the way this turned out. I'm going to put my stems on and then I will show you the finished result. So here is my finished design. So I've got 4 flowers going into an abstract flower bed. Again, I'm really pleased with how this turns out. I hope you really like how your project turns out. I will close up here and show you some of the designs I got down at the bottom. So even though it did not stay exactly within those shapes, I really do like this effect. It looks like something that, you'd have to use computer graphics to get, where there's sometimes some bleeding and sometimes some really nice, sharp, clean edges. So I hope you enjoy experimenting with this technique. I did just use another Sharpie to make the stem and the leaves, but if you want to do something like this, if you want to draw some additional parts of your design, you may want to actually go and get a fabric marker. It might not bleed quite so much. I'm not too concerned about the bleeding because this is a very abstract design to begin with, and clean edges are not really a big part of this design, but you may feel differently and you may want some really nice clean edges in some part of your design. So I do recommend going and just getting a fabric marker maybe for that. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in another video.